Now welcome to another lightning response video, where this time I'm going to tackle a question from my Discord server, though I got a ton of questions on that video the other day about Grey Jedi that I will hopefully get to in a video in the near future. Anyway, this particular question comes to us from Orion's Star, who asked, "Hey Thor, now that Dune 2 has made it clear that this film adaptation is a success and one that we are liable to see continue in one form or another, what do you think it means for Star Wars going forward? It isn't a big secret that Star Wars was heavily influenced by Dune, and while there are clear differences between them developed over the decades, they still fall under broadly the same space epic category. The thing is, I find it difficult to see that epicness in Star Wars these days. It did have it once upon a time, but compared to Dune, it feels very diluted now. Dune 2 seems to suggest that the appetite for this type of movie hasn't gone away, but considering the currently announced projects in Star Wars' case, I must ask, can Star Wars answer the challenge? At best, I could see Disney looking at what works and insisting on changes. At worst, I do wonder if the inspiring franchise might not replace the one it inspired, along with other new offerings, if it doesn't pick up the gauntlet. What does Star Wars even have in the pipeline that could match Dune? Looking forward to hearing your thoughts." And for some reason, this question right away reminds me of what George Lucas said, or what his response or critique was of The Force Awakens when it first came out, which was to say, there's nothing new. He then went on to basically say they made a retro movie, and he didn't really like that, because his thing with Star Wars was to not only always push the technology forward, to do new and never seen or done before things on that front, but to also do new and different things with the story itself, and you can even say, for the films to all feel different from each other. And clearly, The Force Awakens, though no, not bad in the visual department by any stretch, but it didn't really do anything new there, and it certainly didn't do anything new with the story, whereas the prequels, on the other hand, they feel very different in many ways from the original trilogy, and that's because, yeah, Lucas wanted it that way. He didn't want to do the same thing over again. And even though, sure, there were those, especially back in the day, who complained that the prequels felt too different from the originals and were put off by that, but the thing is, trying to make something like the original trilogy again to try and kind of recapture that same feel and magic they once had, it would have almost certainly failed and left people thinking or feeling like he couldn't do anything new and different with Star Wars, and that the prequels are just an inferior version of the original trilogy. Instead, love or hate them, the prequels are seen as their own thing and judged on their own merits, usually or more or less. While the sequels, which again in many ways did try to copy elements of the original trilogy, are kind of often mocked for, being an inferior version of them. But anyway, the reason why I brought that up, and look, I'm not trying to just make another let's bash on Disney Star Wars video here, but the reason why I brought that up is because I do feel like Star Wars has, in a few different ways you could argue, I think it has completely stagnated, if not kind of gone backwards, and maybe even sort of devolved here in the Disney era. Not only because, it's become more about churning out a continuous stream of content to sell in the moment, rather than telling epic stories in unique and visually appealing ways that will stand the test of time, but also because of that, it doesn't seem to know how to offer viewers something fresh and new and different that truly wows audiences or gets them or the world talking. Arguably the most buzzworthy thing to come out of Star Wars in the past decade, in a positive way at least, was Baby Yoda or Grogu. A little green puppet has essentially been the most notable thing of the Disney Star Wars era. But other than that, when's the last time, or ever, have you heard people outside of the more core fandom, let's call it, when have you heard them talking about something Star Wars has done or was doing or is going to do? And yet, I can't help but feel like the world is talking about Dune. I've had so many people ask me if I've seen it yet, or they just want to talk about it, or they ask if I've read the books, and all these sorts of things. People who have long since stopped talking or caring about Star Wars, who used to ask me questions about it, but now don't or haven't in a long while, they're all excited to talk about Dune because of what it just did. And I honestly think the sheer, let's call it epicness of Dune 2, it's one of the most amazing movies I've ever seen, especially visually, but it makes the stagnation in Star Wars all the more noticeable or glaring to me when something essentially in the same category or genre as Star Wars just completely outdoes Star Wars in pretty much every way imaginable. Which isn't to say that Star Wars and Dune are or should be exactly alike or anything, even though, Star Wars seems to have copied much from Dune. There are a lot of similarities between the two, coincidentally enough. But even though they aren't or shouldn't be exactly the same type of movie, they are still in that same category, and again, it just feels like Dune out Star Wars and asserted itself as the premier franchise in this category, and by a long ways. And to go back to the question now, no, I don't think Star Wars has anything in the pipeline that will compete with this or even be close to this level. Certainly I wouldn't expect the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, which will be the next one to come out. I wouldn't expect that to be anything remotely close to Dune in terms of scope and scale. Not that it should be exactly. I think obviously this will be or should be a little bit of a smaller scale story just naturally. But certainly those comparisons will be made by some after, again, Dune just seemingly took the throne, if you will, from Star Wars, and with that being the next Star Wars movie to come out. In fact, I think that movie, Mando and Grogu, is being made simply because I think it's a safe bet after the initial success of the Disney Plus show and after how long Star Wars has been away from the theaters, and that it tends to be trending downward. Keeping in mind again that Grogu is the biggest, most recognizable thing they have created with Star Wars in the Disney era. I don't think the film is being made because they want to offer us a mind-blowing theater experience like Dune did, as much as they think it's simply a good way to get people back into the theaters for a Star Wars movie without taking a huge risk on something completely new, and to do it without breaking the bank either. Again, I'm not expecting this to be the most epic feeling Star Wars movie, or should I say to have the biggest budget ever. Furthermore, or along with this, I do think a case could be made that the Disney Plus shows haven't exactly been a net positive for the franchise. I don't know that it hasn't, in a way, done more harm than good in the minds of, again, the more average or casual fan. I don't know that they necessarily want this sort of continuous stream of Star Wars content at a lower quality level than what they're used to or expect from it, or if they'd rather just have a fun, epic movie to go to in a theater every couple of years. For example, and as I was kind of talking about before, and yes, granted, this is only a personal anecdote, but less and less people I personally know are watching Star Wars on Disney Plus, and those who keep watching it are less and less excited about it. Mainly because, like I was saying, there's nothing all that special about it. And they expect special or big sci-fi spectacles from Star Wars. And they don't get that from these shows. Not to mention, sometimes they're just not very good either. Obviously, quality has been the most detrimental thing to Star Wars as of late, I'd say, not just the scale of it. And don't get me wrong here, as a hardcore Star Wars fan, as someone who has sat down and read a ton of Star Wars books in my day, I obviously don't always need epic scale or visually incredible Star Wars to enjoy it. I'm very cool with the idea, though not always the end result, of these smaller scale shows on Disney Plus. We're getting more Star Wars than just films every few years. I'll take as much Star Wars as you want to give me, as long as it's good. However, for a lot of people out there, for the normies, let's say, Star Wars, in their mind, right or wrong, is supposed to be a big movie or theater-going experience. Even if it was consistently good on Disney Plus, that's not exactly what they expect out of it. And so if Star Wars isn't going to give them that, and Dune will, well, I think there's a really good chance they'll save their money and pass on seeing the next Star Wars movie when it comes out, and instead wait till another Dune movie comes out, because that gives them what they're looking for or expecting from this sort of film. Or they'll just wait to see a Star Wars movie on Disney Plus because it offers no reason to go to the theater to see it. And so the question then becomes, how does Star Wars fix this problem or compete with Dune? Assuming Dune makes more movies, that this is about to become a true film franchise, which I think is pretty much a given, and that they continue to be masterpieces or close to it, which is certainly not a given, but so far so good. Well, if Dune does keep churning out epic films over the next decade or so, and Star Wars puts out smaller scale duds that offer little to nothing new story-wise or visually, I think you'll probably see Star Wars essentially try to copy Dune, again, and try to match them on this epic scale. Which I think could mean finally seeing Star Wars here in the Disney era, move to the Old Republic era, where we could get some visually incredible stories of Jedi versus Sith and gigantic space battles and epic sweeping politics, all the sorts of things that seem to be working for Dune. Though, a few days back now, I put out a video talking about the possibility of Disney-era Lucasfilm going to the Old Republic, and a lot of people wanted them to stay far, far away from that, fearing they'd only screw it up, which I certainly understand. But again, if Dune is going to be the next, or is the current big thing that is going to, or has dethroned Star Wars, well, to compete, Star Wars will need to up their game. Dune being great could oddly enough, be the best thing ever to happen to Star Wars or for its fans, because not only is competition always a good thing, but sometimes losing, or losing money, forces a company to re-examine things and to up their game. So maybe, just maybe, Dune being great will bring about changes for or at Lucasfilm. Maybe they could get the old Republic era right if they were in the right frame of mind. Maybe they could and would pour the time, love, and money into it to create something truly epic to rival Dune, which is what I think all fans of the old Republic want to see from it. They want to see it treated very carefully and like the epic tale it should be. Or, then again, yeah, maybe nothing will change. Maybe Dune will go on and take the throne or championship belt away from Star Wars, and the steady stream of mediocre content will continue to flow from Disney and Lucasfilm. Well, that's all I got for you this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and weigh in on this one. Do you think Dune is the new Star Wars? And could this be a good thing in the long run for Star Wars or for its fans? Or you can always ask a question for a future lightning response video. All you got to do is start your comment off with "Hey Thor" and then ask away. But whatever you choose to do, leave those comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.